Lund Boats proudly presents Jarrett Edwards Outdoors. Jarrett Edwards Outdoors is presented by Mercury, Lund Boats, Dobbins Rods, Lowrance, Gary Yamamoto Custom Baits, Tackle Warehouse, and Nishine Lure Works.
I'm Jarrett Edwards. Welcome to the show. Today we're back on beautiful Lake Powell here on the Arizona-Utah border. Now, Lake Powell is amazing. It's generally 186 miles long, nearly 2,000 miles of shoreline. Unbelievable. Now today, traditionally, this lake, you can see 25 to 30 foot visibility. But due to some recent rising water, we're going to have stained water in the back of this pocket. Now, I've located with my electronics a whole lot of shad back here. And I tell you, stained water, shad in the springtime, this is going to be a win-win opportunity. Today's show, I expect to catch largemouth, smallmouth, striper, and possibly even a walleye. Who knows? But come along and join us. Springtime Lake Powell. What's better than this? There he is. Look what we got here. Oh, a little largemouth this morning. Look at that. Nothing wrong with him, huh? Yeah, that's a nice fish. I tell you what, you take a look at a bank like this and you're like, what in the world are these fish sitting on, right? It's just sand. However, coming through here with our electronics and being able to use different modes, you're able to see that there's large chunk rock just sitting down in here. And I tell you what, makes for a win-win combination on some of these fish. Let's go ahead and get him in without getting pinned. Yes, sir. Wow, look at that big old belly. Looks like he's ready to go off sometime soon. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get him back in. But yeah, a little Chippewa bait this morning. Nice little orange pattern. And sure enough, not a long fish, but just a stout 2.5, 2 3/4 pound fish. Tell you what, crankbait sometimes will be a win-win. Let's go ahead and put her back in. See you later, baby. There we go. What do we got here? What do we have here? Well, I tell you, I'm so used to playing in Lake Powell in 25 to 30 foot visibility. So anytime I get to come and play in stained water and catch fish out at 2 to 4 foot is really a good time. This is just Bubba fishing at its finest. Nice little largemouth. Come on up here, buddy. Look at that, man, they're just destroying this bait today. You know, the biggest thing is making contact with these fish here in that water column. I'm gonna go ahead and put him in. I'll tell you about it. You know, what we're doing is taking this crankbait and we're literally just taking this, throwing it really close to these rocks. And as you can see, I'm not sitting out here throwing in. I'm more parallel in the bank because the strike zone is really 1.5 to 4 foot today. So I'm getting right next to the bank, casting down the bank, and then bringing it in. I told the camera person, I said, man, there has to be a fish on that point. It just makes so much sense. And well, sure enough, the 4th cast, we ended up catching it. So repeated casts seem to be key. And any time I can make the bill of this bait hit actually into that rock, man, that's gonna cause those fish to strike, get angry at it, go and attack it. So that's what it's all about, making contact with the structure. Repeated casts in stained water is really gonna put a lot more fish in the boat at the end of the day. Tell you what, beautiful point right here. Let's see if we can't call our shot. Nice long cast over it. Rod tip down again. I'm wanting this bait just to dig in there into these rocks. That's the biggest thing. Making contact with the rocks. That's how you're gonna get bit. Real slow retrieve. Sometimes just pop it a little bit in case one's following it will trigger a bite. There we go. What do we got here? Oh, that thing just annihilated it. What are we dealing with here? Ah, Mr. Striper joined the party. Oh, yeah, look at that. Everything loves that crankbait. Well, this is what you get, guys, when you get stained water and you get shad, right? You're gonna find a variety of species back here. Now this guy's a mess. Hooks all over the place. So let's see if we can't do just a quick release down here. There we go. Again, making contact with the structure, and sure enough, she was in there. You know, I think the orange color of crankbait is really ideal. Orange color bait right here in stained water where you have 6 inches or less of visibility. It's almost like a construction orange on the top, and then it goes to another unique color down there. And no doubt so many fish in here are eating these shad. However, I think this is a cool crawdad looking bait right here, and they don't mind coming on in and taking a swipe at it. So there's some unique characteristics about this bait compared to many of the other baits out there. A lot of people would be throwing a square bill crankbait down here, where you see this bill is actually round. I'll explain why I'm throwing a round bill, and I'll also explain the benefit of this bait here on the next couple catches. It's very unique, and I tell you what, it's a one-of-a-kind deal. A win-win on today's show. There we go. Come on over here, turkey. It's running right at me. Whatever it is. Oh, it's fighting. Come on over here on the old orange crankbait. Ah, another nice little chunky bass there. Come on in here, buddy. That's amazing. These guys aren't long, but they're just stout. You know it? All right, get these pliers. Eating this bait good today. I tell you what, you know, the crankbait you choose matters. Let's go ahead and put that little turkey back in and talk about it. So this is a crankbait designed by a good buddy of mine, and he's a worldwide renowned master lure designer named Hiroshi Nishine. And Hiroshi has designed some of the top baits for other manufacturers for decades, and decided to launch his own lure brand, Nishine Lure Works. This bait right here is phenomenal, a couple reasons. Number one is it's silent. And you might think, well, man, it's stained water. Everything I've always heard about stained water is we need to have a loud rattle bait. But couldn't be further from the truth today. So a silent crankbait. Now we have to understand there's really no such thing as a silent crankbait, because under the water, the hooks are hitting the body and it's making a little bit of sound. But again, we are playing here with a round bill, okay? Not a square bill. You know, the trend for years has been all about square bill crankbaits, and for good reason. A square bill crankbait is phenomenal for bumping into the cover, and it's going to deflect pretty well, having less snags. However, you're generally having a wider wobble with the square bill. With a round bill crankbait, such as what you see here on this Chippewa, you're going to notice that this particular bait has more of a swimming action side to side, and a very tight wobble compared to a very wide wobble. To me, a tighter wobble in colder water such as this today, where it's low to mid 50s, is gonna be really ideal to put a lot of fish in the boat for you. Last but not least, this is the SF model, okay? SF stands for slow float, okay? So every time I can hit a rock, even if I wanna pause it or whatever, it's more of a slow backing up bait, where compared to a traditional bait that's filled with a lot of plastic or balsa, when it hits, it's going to float up right away. This thing is really slow when it deflects, kind of a lazy bait, and makes it really ideal for cold water environments. So again, the round bill, more of a swimming action, a tighter action, which is going to be ideal in cold water environments. And again, the slow float, I think is going to be ideal to trigger a couple more of those lazy bites from the bass. And last but not least, the silent, it's going to make a deadly combination here in these waters. So Nishine lure works. This is the Chippewa crankbait. SF, slow float, cold water. This thing is an absolute killer. It's made an awesome cast right down this bank. 45 in it. There's got to be something home. There he is. Come on over here, buddy. Yes, sir. I knew there had to be something home. Oh, look at that. Mr. Smallmouth came up to actually slap the bait just to try to kill it and stun it, and got pinned on its side there. Come here, buddy. It's so fun, you know, 12, 13-inch fish like this, when they attack and they go and get it underneath like this, they feel huge. Absolutely huge. All right, come here, bud. There she is. Whew. The cold water makes these guys feisty. But again, repeated cast, guys. It's all about repeated cast. I mean, that was my 5th cast on that same point. Just keep mixing up the retrieve a little bit. Fish are down there, they're cold. But sure enough, when I finally could throw this bait out and make contact with the right rock and pause it right after he bit it, he just took advantage of it. So repeated casts, the fish are there. It's just getting them to chew. So let's keep at it. Whoa! Mr. Striper, right. Oh, he's ripping drag. This guy ate with 10 inches of line out right as I was reeling him in. Come on over here, buddy. And he says, come on, put your thumb in my mouth now, bud. I don't think so. I have learned my lesson with old Mr. Stripes. So, basically just gonna take these pliers, go down, grab the bait first. Step 1, there we go. Yeah, that guy was so rude, he had to come up and attack it. Less than a foot of line out, literally ripped that out of there. Now some people say, now what in the world would a striper, why is he attacking an orange bait? But the reality is, again, crawdad looking bait, it's food, it's moving in the water column. And that fish was obviously following it for quite a while, decided just to attack it right at the boat. So always pay attention, stay in water with a crankbait. They can bite it a foot off the bank, or they can bite it right here at the end of your rod tip. So always good to have your drag set, or just go ahead and thumb it, such as I did right there. But man, those fish are a lot of fun. They pull like heck too. There's a fish right there. Man, that thing is pulling. And he bit right where he should have. Right off of that point. I don't know what I have, but it is mean. Come on over here, buddy. Oh, Mr. Striper. Whew, I thought I had me a big old smallmouth. Mr. Striper, huh? All right. Well, let's get him unpinned. Must be a lot of bait in here when these guys move in. All right. What we're gonna do is grab that bait just like that. Bring him in, pin him right behind the head. That kind of just paralyzes him, grabbing him like that. And then we're just gonna slowly take that hook out of him. Nice and gentle. There we go. Do the same over there. Whew, and away he goes. I tell you, striper, absolutely brutal on equipment. Every couple fish you have, definitely go in there, feel the line right there. And it's always good to retire after every couple fish anyhow, but the striper, those fish are absolutely mean.
This segment brought to you by Tackle Warehouse, guaranteed lowest prices.
Fishing Lake Powell in the spring can be absolutely challenging, especially when you're faced with extreme falling water, such as on today's show. I'm sure you've heard throughout the West, we're having some major drought and water shortages. Therefore, on some of our giant bodies of water, we can lose inches of water per day. There's no better bait than to cover a lot of water and to search for some of those large bass rather than a crankbait. This particular bait is the Nishine Lure Works Chippewa RB. The RB stands for round bill, and this particular bait has a nice circuit board type lip, so almost indestructible there. And this is in the color, the matte orange tiger. And I tell you, this particular color, whether it's clear water or stained water, seems to always get the job done. Now, Nishine Lure Works makes two separate variations of the what appears to be the most exact same crankbait. The version that we're using today happens to be the Chippewa SF. Now, the SF model, as you can see right there in the back, stands for slow float. That's going to be ideal as this bait goes down and makes contact with the structure. It's not super buoyant, so it's not going to float up very quick. It's going to actually, once it makes contact with the structure, stay in the strike zone a little bit longer. I tell you, this bait has a nice tight wobble, and there's something about it that in cold water conditions, the slow float model is going to be absolutely deadly, picking up a variety of game fish. Now, we matched this bait today with 12-pound test line, and I tell you, on the business end of things, today we used a 7-foot 6-inch. This happens to be a Dobyns Champion XP rod. This is their crankbait series. And I tell you what, this rod right here is amazing. It's very sensitive, comes factory equipped with Fuji guides. But again, the 7-foot 6-inch length means that you're gonna be able to cast this bait an absolute mile out there. The last 12 to 18-inch section at the end of this rod is very parabolic, and this rod will literally load up like a dream as soon as that bass decides to attack that bait. So again, you have the casting ability with the long rod, the sensitivity with those Fuji guides. This rod is extremely lightweight, but again, this crankbait series is absolutely phenomenal. This particular model happens to be the DC 764CB, and it is designed for 8 to 14-pound tests and lure weights from 1/4 to 3/4 ounce. Now, switching gears, a little bit later in the day, we went and found some clear water pockets. The clear water means so many of those fish are moving right up in there. And I went ahead and switched it up to the jerkbait. Now, this happens to be the Nishine Lure Works. This is the Erie 115 SD. The SD stands for shallow diver. As you can see with this lip right here, it's going to be very, very shallow diving in the water. This jerkbait right here definitely delivered a lot of great strikes from bass and striper a little bit later in the day. All the equipment demonstrated in today's show can be found at our friends at Tackle Warehouse. Tackle Warehouse has the guaranteed lowest prices and my personal favorite, free shipping on items over $50. You know, throwing jerk baits up on these ledges seems to be real key. What we have is we have fish from the deep that will come on up here shallow. There he goes. Oh, there he is. Look at that, that fish is thrashing. Come on over here, Mr. Striper. I let him have some room because he has two buddies that are trying to eat it out of his mouth. Oh, look at the size of that. He has a striper right below him trying to get that bait. This is how you catch numerous fish at once. There he is darting around. come on over here. All right, well, his buddy, he's hanging out 3-4 foot below him. But I'll tell you what, the biggest thing, guys, is always checking your line, because these stripers are absolute savages. There you go. That's a quick striper release. What we got here? Like another striper. And they're just blasting all over the place over here. There, Mr. Striper. All right, guys, I tell you, today has been an absolute blast. We have caught fish on a variety of reaction baits, mainly the orange little crankbait. We switched up here to the Nishine jerk bait. I tell you what, all the stuff from Nishine Lure Works, super quality product, great stuff. See you later, Striper. You know, a fun part of my job is being able to test new equipment and play with a variety of baits year round. And I tell you, Lake Powell is such a great proving ground. There's a variety of fish species in here. They're always so aggressive to catch, and makes for a great time. Guys, I'm Jarrett Edwards. Hope you learned a lot about staying water today and some of our bait choices and some great tips and techniques to take on out with you next time on the water. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week on Jarrett Edwards Outdoors. Whew, my hand's destroyed.
Jarrett Edwards Outdoors is presented by Mercury, Lund Boats, Dobbins Rods, Lowrance, Gary Yamamoto Custom Bait, Tackle Warehouse, and Nishine Lure Works.